If we were to take a magnifying glass to the timeline of human history and slowly drag it across the centuries, past the empires, past the revolutions, past the battlefields soaked in blood, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge. Wars are rarely what they claim to be. They are not always about freedom, not always about honor, not always about defending the homeland. Those are the slogans, the flags, the speeches, the stories we tell young men before sending them to die. But beneath those stories, beneath the parades and patriotic music, there is something colder, quieter, more calculated. Money. Because if you strip away the rhetoric, if you peel back the layers of nationalism and ideology, you often find something surprisingly simple. Someone, somewhere, is getting very rich. It is extraordinarily rare to find a war fought purely from moral principle, completely detached from financial gain. History doesn't move only by bullets. It moves by balance sheets. And if you want proof, you don't need to go back to ancient Rome. You only need to look a little over a century ago, to the catastrophe we call the First World War. Pause for a moment and consider the scale. An entire continent shattered, empires erased from the map, millions of young men buried in foreign soil, a generation traumatized, Europe burned, families starved, cities collapsed. But when the smoke cleared, when the treaties were signed, when soldiers limped home to broken economies, one group stood stronger than ever before. Not the governments, not the people, not the veterans, the banks. And this isn't modern cynicism. It isn't internet conspiracy. It is documented history. History confirmed by the United States government itself. In 1934, during the darkest days of the Great Depression, Americans began asking a dangerous question. Why did we really go to war? Because they had been promised glory, but they got unemployment. They had been promised victory, but they got poverty. So the Senate launched an investigation, a real one. Subpoenas, financial records, closed-door testimonies. This became known as the Nye Committee. For 2 years, investigators followed the money, and what they found was disturbing. Arms deals, private loans, lobbying, pressure campaigns, and enormous profits tied directly to Wall Street. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. War had been good business, very good business. But just as the committee approached the most powerful names, the investigation was quietly strangled. Funding cut, momentum lost, and the findings buried. Because the world was already drifting toward another war, and some interests didn't want old secrets resurfacing. So today, we reopen those archives, not to retell battles, not to glorify generals, but to follow the transactions. Because sometimes history isn't written in blood, it's written in ink. If you ask most people what started World War I, they'll say the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And technically, they're right, but that was only the spark. And sparks don't cause explosions unless someone has already stacked the gunpowder. Wars this large are not accidents. They are industrial projects. They require years of preparation, years of financing, years of planning. And long before the first shot was fired, the financial beneficiaries were already positioned. At the center of it all stood a small circle of international bankers, most notably the House of Morgan. J.P. Morgan wasn't just a banker. In the early 1900s, he was something closer to a financial sovereign, an private empire, an institution so powerful it could stabilize or crash the American economy almost single-handedly. Governments didn't ignore Morgan. They consulted him. Sometimes they depended on him. When war erupted in 1914, America declared neutrality. No troops, no fighting. But American money? That crossed the ocean immediately, because Britain and France needed everything: food, steel, explosives, uniforms, guns. And they didn't have the cash, so they borrowed, massively, from American banks, mostly Morgan. Billions of dollars in modern terms. And here's where the trap formed. If the Allies lost, those loans would never be repaid, which meant American banks would collapse. Wall Street wasn't betting on ideology, it was betting on victory. And suddenly, neutrality became financially dangerous. So Morgan secured an extraordinary agreement. He became the sole purchasing agent for the Allies. If Britain needed wheat, Morgan. If France needed shells, Morgan. If they needed steel, chemicals, horses, Morgan. Every order, every contract, every shipment passed through his hands, and every transaction meant commission. But the real money, the loans. Here's how the cycle worked. Morgan loaned money to Britain. That money stayed in New York. Britain used it to buy American goods. Factories profited. Morgan collected fees. Goods were shipped to Europe and destroyed, but the debt remained, and the profits stayed in America. It was a perfect financial loop. War as an economic engine. And the results were obvious. While Europe bled, America boomed. Factories ran 24/7, unemployment dropped, stocks soared, the economy became addicted to war orders. Peace, ironically, became bad for business, because if peace came too soon, the order stopped, factories closed, loans defaulted, Wall Street panicked. By 1917, there was only one solution left. If the banks wanted their money back, the United States had to guarantee an Allied victory. Not morally, financially. The government had to step in, which meant only one thing: America had to join the war. But there was a problem. The American people didn't want it, so public opinion had to be engineered. And what followed became one of the most aggressive propaganda campaigns in history. Posters, films, newspapers, speakers, stories of enemy atrocities. Some true, many exaggerated, some completely fabricated. Germans weren't portrayed as soldiers anymore. They were monsters, barbarians, threats to civilization itself. Dissent became illegal. Criticism became illegal. And within months, a reluctant population transformed into a crusading one. Then came the Liberty loans, billions raised from ordinary Americans. And where did that money go? Straight to Britain and France. And where did they send it? Back to the banks. Private risk became public debt. The bankers were saved, the soldiers were sent. When the war ended, the transformation was complete. Before the war, America owed Europe. After the war, Europe owed America. Gold flooded into U.S. vaults, from 375 tons to over 4,000 tons. The financial capital of the world shifted overnight from London to New York. Wall Street had won. But the price? Germany crushed under impossible reparations, hyperinflation, economic collapse, humiliation. And from that chaos rose a man named Hitler, which means the financial decisions of World War I didn't prevent another war, they scheduled one. So when we look back at World War I, we shouldn't just see trenches and treaties. We should see contracts, loans, debt. Because sometimes wars aren't fought to win territory, they're fought to protect investments. And the most profitable place in war isn't the battlefield, it's the bank. And now the question falls to you. If those loans hadn't existed, if Wall Street had nothing at risk, would America still have entered the war? Was intervention destiny, or was it business? Let me know what you think, because understanding history isn't about memorizing dates, it's about recognizing patterns. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it.